Thank you for everybody coming. We're going to go ahead and get started. We are dealing with House Bill 78. Sir, would you like to? Oh, we need roll call. I forget about that. Thank you, Ms. Childers. Will you take roll call?
Representative Alaman. Representative Angelos. Representative Haroldson.
Here.
Representative Pendergraft.
Here.
Representative Sherwood.
Here.
Representative Smith.
Here.
Chairman Bear.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Childers. All right, let's get started. House Bill 78, Forest Health Grant Program.
Madam Chairman and members of the Appropriation Committee, pleasure to be here before you today to introduce an old friend to you guys. And hopefully try to make this brief and allow my opportunity for the supporting cast behind me to provide some testimony on this bill. But a little bit of history about this. This has kind of been a 3-year endeavor of the legislature. We started looking at this, I think 3 years ago. There was a joint committee meeting in Pinedale, Wyoming as part of the Colorado River Forum. We had the Council of States West. They did their tour in Wyoming that year. But part of that was the impact of forestry management on water yield. And so that's where it kind of started. And then last year, a select water committee took a little interest on it. They sponsored this legislation. It's broader than just water. It's about, when we deal with forestry, it's the hydrology, it's the timber industry, it's the wildlife, it's the recreation. It's literally the foundational natural resource base that so many of our economies rely on there. And they're interrelated. You can't pull the string on here that doesn't affect it here. So this is trying to kind of get back to the very origins. And the beauty of what we're doing here now is one of the impediments that we've had in the past that doesn't exist today is in some cases was just dealing with the bureaucracy of the federal government and the ever-changing pendulum of policy with the federal government, which was constant. But because when we look at our national forest systems, at least in the Colorado River Basin, we know that 80% of all the water generated in the Colorado comes off national forests in the upper basin. That may even be a little higher percentage for the state of Wyoming. So that's a very important component that ties into water. That was the nexus that Select Water took. But last year, so we started in 23, we continued to work on that into 24, and it brought into the 25 session sponsored legislation, and it's almost identical. In fact, it may be identical. I think there was one thing that we may have taken out of there last year. But, you know, that process went through the Senate, came over to the House, come to the House Appropriations Committee. We just ran out of time last year. And so we're back before you today to talk about the opportunity to implement a program. And again, our federal partners. And so what this effectively does, and I think the folks behind me will be able to show how this works. We're in a position now that we can strategically do. Historically, my friend Pat O'Toole always articulated, we have to quit prescribing 1-acre solutions to million-acre problems. And we have a partner in the federal government, we have a partner in the state, and we have a partner. So we're talking the entire landscape across the state of Wyoming that we're dealing with. We have an opportunity to prescribe a 1 million acre solution to a 10 million acre problem. And this is an absolute essential step to get that process started. And so with that, Madam Chairman and many of the committees, I'm not going to go through the bill with you. It basically sets up a grant program through state forestry to allow the state of Wyoming to start participating in these silvicultural, multi-dimensional, multiple use type projects that have those positive benefits across the state. And with that, Madam Chairman, just to expedite the proceedings and let other people, you guys get an opportunity to hear senators bloviate all the time. And I would rather reserve your time to talking to people that understand how this actually works on the ground. But with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any questions for the senator? Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for being here, Senator. As I'm looking at the language and I'm looking at paragraph Romanet 5 under subparagraph B here as we're talking about the uses for this grant. It's pretty open language there. Do you have any concerns that that'll get out of hand and that could be used for something that you and I might not agree is really for forest health? Uses the word language, any other project that is beneficial to forest health, that is substantially beneficial to the interests of the state, and that has a public purpose as determined by the state forester.
So Madam Chairman, if
Senator?
I may, and I think that's always a safeguard, and I appreciate your bringing that to attention, but because of the reporting requirements in here and the state forester has to come back with their budget maybe annually, but at least every biennial. And quite frankly, having sit in your position for a number of years, I've always had concerns with kind of blanket statements like that. But I also think in this particular case, past performance does dictate future returns. And my experience here, because we implemented a similar program a number of years ago that was tremendously beneficial to the Black Hills. I have never seen anything in my time here that would lead me to suspect that we may end up being concerned with how these programs are administered through state forestry. I think there's so many people involved in that process that I think to a certain degree it safeguards it. And we also have the reporting requirement annually back associated with the program. So again, Madam Chairman, I don't know if that answered your question, Representative Bear, but I guess that would be my perspective on this.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any other questions? All right. Would anybody else like to come forward?
Switch seats.
Thank you, Forester Norris. Why don't you introduce yourself and please go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, how do you chair? Everyone is different. And committee members, my name is Kelly Norris. I'm the Wyoming State Forester. Thank you for your time today to discuss House Bill 78, Forest Health Grant Program. I do want to be clear, this isn't necessarily a grant program, it's a cost share. So this is 75%, up to 75% of a cost share. So there is expected skin in the game when it comes to these projects, to be clear. So Wyoming, as the good Senator Hicks said, is considered a headwater state. So this means that our forests hold the headwaters of the Colorado, the Missouri and Columbia rivers, as well as the headwaters to the Great Salt Lake. And we provide water to millions of people downstream from these headwaters. Protecting and restoring the source of Wyoming's water, specifically managing Wyoming's biggest reservoir, our snowpack, is increasingly urgent priority for Wyoming citizens, for our agriculture, wildlife, and recreation. Our federal forests need to be managed to reduce wildfire impacts and effects, and so does Wyoming's 2.5 million acres of state and private forest lands. And I'll give an example. In October 2024, we had the Elk Fire, and that burned 98,000 acres across municipal watersheds for the Sheridan area, as well as Dayton and Ranchester. Total costs for the suppression efforts were about $48 million, but long-term costs and impacts on the municipal water, the irrigation and ranchers, to the wildlife and recreation are yet to be known. The top priority during the time we were dealing with the Elk Fire was the municipal water facilities. This is because we know Sheridan is the 6th largest city in Wyoming, but has no backup water source for water that comes off the Bighorn Mountains. And it has only one municipal water facility that the municipal water is treated and piped through. So it became a significant #1 priority when we looked at how we're going to put out that fire. So active forest management that was completed actually on state trust lands became a significant means to stop the Elk Fire. That fire came barreling out of the Tongue River Reservoir canyon there, and the fire, when it burned up onto the state trust lands, we had past harvest units and a very large aspen enhancement project that was completed in coordination with the Wyoming Game and Fish and U.S. Forest Service. And this is where the fire stopped and saved 3 state lease cabins, wildlife habitat, and essential grasslands for grazing. The management that was completed on that state lands resulted in lower suppression costs because think about it, we didn't have to order that air tanker. We didn't have to order the dozer to go around the cabins and save the cabins. We didn't have to have the firefighters come up there. It just stopped right there in that management area. State Forestry has implemented project work as proposed in this bill years ago, as Senator Hicks talked about. The Wyoming Legislature invested in forest management to help with the mountain pine beetle epidemic in the Black Hills. And with this kind of weather, I've been thinking to myself how dry it is and how warm it is. Do we have mountain pine beetle coming back again? And we're going to be watching for that specifically in the bighorns, on the face, and in the Black Hills. But the result of this investment, and that we provided you a handout to take a look at what was done in the Black Hills, is really paying off right now because these live, healthy Wyoming Black Hills forests have become the backbone timber supply for the local Wyoming mills, keeping them in business. It's helping provide jobs and an economy to Crook and Weston counties. Historically, the funds that were used for this important management work were placed in the emergency fire suppression account. This bill creates an account that's detached from that emergency fire suppression account, keeping fire suppression costs separate from active forest management work. When federal funding is available and awarded to state forestry, we implement a cost share program similar to this proposed bill, and we expect to implement the program without needing to increase staffing. The funds we receive from the U.S. Forest Service are typically from competitive grants, and they focus on their priorities and where they want funds to be rather than Wyoming's. And this bill is an incredible opportunity to be much more strategic in completing cross-boundary projects and gives us the ability to leverage funds such as these federal funds, including our Good Neighbor Authority program. On March 1st, 2025, President Trump signed Executive Order 14225, the immediate expansion of American timber production. And on August 1st, 2025, Governor Gordon signed Executive Order 2025-04, increase of active forest management in Wyoming. State Forestry is taking both executive orders very seriously, and this bill will support the implementation and desires of the national and state forest management policy. Lastly, I'm going to bring us back to October when we and Joint Appropriations and we talked about proactive management and the ROI. So studies have shown that prevention work such as forest management reduces the severity of wildfires and increases the efficiency of suppression efforts. For every dollar spent on hazardous fuels mitigation, the return on investment can average $4 to $7 in suppression cost savings. So that means this bill, when implemented, will save $12 to $21 million in wildfire suppression costs. That's worth the investment for our Wyoming and for our communities. So support for prevention efforts is in particularly very strong in the West, where wildfire is occurring frequently and causing the most damage. With that, I will stop here and thank you for your consideration of this bill and open it up for any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Forrester Norris? Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Norris, thank you for being here. Appreciate your diligence on this issue and working with this committee on fire prevention. And I think we're pretty excited as a committee to see the success that you're going to have with the resources we're providing to you. I didn't know this one was coming, but we did have some conversations about this summer. Glad to see this bill here. So back to Romanet 5. It says any other project that is beneficial to forest health. I'm assuming that the decisions on these grants, when it's being decided, is it going to be beneficial or is it not, comes down to you. Would that be an accurate statement?
Madam Chairman, Representative, yes, but in this bill, remember, there will be rules lined out.
Sure.
And the way we would look at this is we would prioritize Wyoming's priorities.
Follow.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Forrester Norris, that all makes perfect sense to me, and I'm really good with it. I just would like you to kind of educate the committee on kind of the scope of what you would see these grants going for. I can envision it myself, but I'd rather hear it from you, really, what you anticipate this money being spent on.
Forrester Norris.
Madam Chairman, Representative, that's a great question. What we're going to really prioritize is large-scale cross-boundary projects. We're going to need to think about where and when this is going to, and also the money that can be leveraged. So again, this is a cost share. So if priorities and places across our state, and we have, like you spoke to, there's 4 different things here: the enhancement of water yield and quality, the reduction of risk of catastrophic wildfire damage, the increase in production of forest products, and then the improvement of habitat. To me, that's active management. That's looking at where do we have projects that it's going to cost money to get that important work done? Do we need to balance out hauling that timber off to a distance, and some of that is going to cost us some money, that smaller material, those type of things that take extra hands, and there's just not an economic benefit in the handling of those costs of those projects. And that's what we really are challenged with in certain areas of the state, in particular, where we don't have infrastructure. It really is a burden to have things like transportation and hauling costs, sometimes roads and things like that. So where we see these projects being the largest benefit to us when we're thinking about snowpack and thinning, when we're thinking about around communities like fuel breaks, where we can see that there is going to be a large scale project, that would be where we're going to try and do those type of priorities and prioritize that out. I don't have anything in particular and specific, but I do know, because I don't want to make assumptions, to be fair, but there's quite a few people here that can provide also some examples of what we have done. And because this bill does have GNA in it now, that did get added in select water in November. There is a 50-50 for GNA. We could see what we like about that is the flexibility of the lands, because we know that forests know no bounds. And so if we can have a project that can be looked at on federal, state, private lands, that's going to be the best benefit. That's what we want to see. And that's what this bill does.
Thank you, Forrester. Is there any other questions, or do you have a follow-up? Any other questions? Representative Haraldson.
Thank you very much. And Forrester Norris, it's good to have you back. It kind of seems like this is like your home committee now, right? So a couple questions that I have on page 5, subsection G. No forest grants under the subsection shall be approved after July 1st, 2030. So we're seeing kind of a form of a sunset here, but no understanding of a continuation after that or any verbiage of that. Can you talk a little bit of why it was decided to do a 4-year run, 2 bienniums concept?
Forrester Norris.
Madam Chairman, Representative, that's a good question. The original bill did have a sunset date. The committee wanted to, in select water the previous year, wanted to see proof of the concept, right? In front of select water this year, it was a back and forth conversation. They didn't want it in there, then they wanted it fully in my budget, and then they also had the sunset date in it. So I think this was the compromise that ended where it did. So that's, I guess, my answer to you on that. It's going to be a conversation, right? We're planning, and the fiscal note will show that to you, that we plan to utilize these funds right away. We plan, I think it was $1.5 million in the first year and $1.5 million the next year. We don't want to sit and wait on this. And so as we're all aware, the management that needs to get done is so great. We want to get going on it. So we will probably run out of that money, but I think what they wanted to do is still have that ability just in case projects, as we know, when we put them out to bid, maybe they're less than we expect, right? And so we will have some funding left over. So is there enough time frame in those 4 years to utilize all the funds that we possibly could within this?
Follow up?
Representative Harrelson?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Director Norris, thanks for that explanation on that. So with that, 2 more questions. One, there are entities out there that love our forests, and they may be private entities, not publicly funded. And what if they're like, hey, this is an area where we can help inject some financial blessing into this program? Is there, I mean, I know we've talked about it in the past as we've looked at this. Can we talk about that? And then the second aspect is, as we've talked about fuel mitigations this summer, obviously, I think kind of our entire idea about fire has been, can we be proactive instead of reactive, right? How do we fix this before we get deep into the weeds and find ourselves with another elk fire? Can you talk a little bit about, obviously, I know that some of what you mentioned, but will there be an emphasis on that fuel mitigations? Obviously, we're wanting for watershed purposes and other things, but I think predominantly to try clean up some of these old forests that might have a lot of dead and down.
Forrester Norris?
Okay, Madam Chairman and Representative, when it comes to donations, I believe this is allowed. And I believe this, that's why I is there under G on page 5 about having to, after 2030, if it's not used, give it away. But that's the reason I think what is so powerful about this bill is the fact that it's a cost share program and it's going to leverage exactly the funds that you're talking about from other organizations. It doesn't have to come from federal funds. And that's incredibly important to think about. And we have that ability in our, when it comes to specifically just for projects for Good Neighbor Authority as well. And we've done that in the Buffalo Municipal Watershed Project. The Nature Conservancy gave State Forestry $5,000, and we did aspen enhancement treatments in specific areas for that watershed. So those are ideas that I think that concept is there for and in this bill. Okay, so the next question was wildfire and wildfire priority. Absolutely. And that's number 2 listed in this. Fire, forests, snowpack, that is incredibly important. When we think about areas that have burned off, we are finding in studies that the snow isn't staying because there's no trees to shade them in a spacing to hold that snowpack. It's incredibly important to think about how these large-scale fires are going to impact water. And so wildfire is definitely thought through in this bill.
Thank you, Forrester Norris. Any other questions? All right. Would anybody else like to speak on this bill? Speaker Nyman.
Good afternoon, committee. Yeah, I would have to come and speak in support of this legislation. I am a beneficiary of this type of management. I actually live in the Black Hills. My ranch is seated in the middle of the Black Hills National Forest. Around, I guess, would be the Wyoming side and the northern edge of it. But all of the water that runs out of my irrigation water rights comes from out of the Black Hills, out of a tributary that flows directly out of the hills. And so just, you know, when Director Norris was giving you some figures on anywhere from a $4 to a $7 increase in value, return on investment for every $1. I would challenge that, and I would say that is far greater, maybe double that, because we're only talking about really managing the forests. My benefit would come on as a downstream user is this better management of our forests creates water flow, which helps the adjudicated water rights that are territorial on our ranch to be able to continue to be used in dry years. If we do not allow management of our forests, then we limit the ability of our agricultural producers to be able to operate. That water I depend on to come down out of those mountains. And if I don't manage those trees as a state, then I'm not only limiting the ability to be able to control fire and the impacts that go with that and the external costs with it, but I'm also limiting my downstream people that are affected by this and their inability to be able to continue to keep their operations running. And so these dollars that you're spending up there, I've seen an actual response from it, as on the Blacktail Creek is what we're talking specifically about, and Hershey Creek coming out of the Black Hills Forest through the Blacktail Creek Canyon and down into the Belle Fourche River. That is my primary water supply. And it's not only mine, but there are other users on that that have subordinate rights to mine. If the forest is not managed, an average, I think with some data I looked at one time, an average pine tree takes approximately 200 to 250 gallons of water per day to survive. So when you go up into a drainage and you start managing this forest for better management use, you are allowing that water to infiltrate into the profile and make its way to these streams, which invigorates them. So when it's getting dry in the summer and we're needing water to keep our crops alive, that forest and that storage of water that has been up in those mountains is making its way down to help us be able to survive. Not to mention what we're doing on being able to manage fire. And so this is good money spent. I mean, I'm looking at a bunch of appropriators that are as tight-fisted as a group of people as you're ever going to find in life. And I don't think you guys have seen anything yet behind me, what's getting ready to come. But I will say this, you need to spend some money sometimes to make money. I live and I ranch, and I know those things are necessary. You have to, good management and forward thinking and dollars spent at the proper time for the proper investment can yield revenue, dividends that we can hardly even begin to grasp. And so just to bring a little perspective, I actually live where they're talking about doing this. I've seen the impacts and the benefits of this management and encouraging others to do this kind of management practices through some dollars that are going to touch not only our forests, but our agricultural industry, even to the point of recreation. Being able to keep enough water flowing downstream to keep our wildlife and our fisheries alive and things like that all begins with proper forest management. So I would encourage you guys to support this if you can see your way clear to do that. I would be stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are there any questions? Chairman Bear.
Madam Chairman, no, you're not out of the hot seat.
Okay,
Mr.
all right.
Speaker. We appreciate you coming to appropriations and
Glad to
the
be here,
comments
sir.
about our hawkish fiscal nature. We appreciate
Yeah,
that.
your reputation precedes you. Go ahead.
I noticed all the nodding behind you as well. Yeah, I understand this is really going to be helpful for your area, but this is a match. Are you familiar with organizations and potential funding sources for the other half of this grant program that are going to be available in your area?
I do, and some of the quick research I did was that we're also looking at federal matching dollars that are coming in that the Trump administration, and we're having other states like Idaho has invested and potentially multiple millions, tens of millions of dollars into these very same types of programs in an effort to try to embrace forest management coming down through the Trump administration with release of permitting and allowing more harvesting and management of our timber. You're going to be looking at other people like conservation services and folks like that are going to be able to chime in and bring some of their dollars to work in this and help to make those dollars multiplied to use in this. So yeah, this is going to be a many folds opportunity here for folks, but I just really believe that sometimes you have to really look at some dollars to invest to be able to encourage people to do the right thing. I hate to say that, even from my perspective as a landowner, I'm currently timbering right now. I've got folks in there cutting trees on my property because I'm wanting to manage for grass and I'm wanting to manage for fire and I'm wanting to manage for, better, stronger forests for the generation that's on my ranch right now. But there's some other folks out there that maybe don't have that opportunity and are needing some encouragement. And I think guardrailed and organized, and I would have to say I would trust Director Norris to do a good job of making sure that this isn't just money thrown at the wind like fairy dust. I think this is going to be very well managed dollars that are going to do what you're wanting them to do, and that's not be wasted for the taxpayers. And so I believe it would be very well handled, and there will be matches come from other areas that will be positive and help to extend the life of these dollars and make them more useful.
Follow up? All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is there
Thank you
anything
all.
else?
I will get out of your hair.
All right. Is there anyone else who would like to testify? You already did. Senator Hicks.
Madam Chairman, and just as somebody that's implemented a number of these projects under the year, and it gets to Representative Bear's question, where we see is a significant private sector investment in matching these. And so many of these are what we would call below cost timber sales. In other words, the harvest of the timber doesn't pay for the costs, but those logs are still going to the sawmill. And so you have a 100% cost model, 50% here, 50% of this in a number of cases will be paid by the cost from the private sector for that material to go back into. And I think we often overlook that contribution from the private sector. And particularly where we're trying to get those multiple use benefits of a fuel break that may have material that's, some of it's just not merchantable, but some of it is. The private sector will pay for that part that is. And so we end up what we call as a below cost timber sale, which means the private sector's contributing. They can't afford to do all of it because there's too much material that's just not merchantable. And so we will see private sector investment alongside of these in those scenarios. And I'm very aware of a number of projects that I've had the opportunity to work on. That was exactly the case. And so it's broader than just other granting entities. It's private sector participation in these programs also.
Questions, Chairman Bear?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Senator, do you think this type of activity will put us well ahead of our West Coast fellow states, how they're handling this stuff?
Madam
Senator.
Chairman, the West Coast is all relative, whether you're looking north or south. There's other people that define it. Yes, Madam Chairman, the answer to the
Any other questions for Senator Hicks? Are there any other individuals in the room that would like to come up and speak? Please come up. If you could just introduce yourself.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Brad Brooks. I'm the director for the City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. And I have with me Clint Bassett, who is our Water Treatment Division Manager. Appreciate the opportunity to get to come before you this morning and just maybe share a real life story, as Senator Hicks mentioned earlier. In about 2018, we started to notice we had several problems in around our Lake Owen, Rob Roy areas where we get our drinking water over in the Snowy Range south of Laramie. We entered into a project between three of us, the City of Cheyenne, State Forestry, was the Good Neighbor Authority, as well as the U.S. Forest Service. And we did a project over there where we mitigated a lot of the beetle kill that was around that reservoir. And again, those reservoirs, Rob Roy and Lake Owen, are vital. That's our drinking water supply for the City of Cheyenne. And we did a project together where we cut a lot of that and really cleaned it up. Move forward, we did also a little bit around Rob Roy as well. But everybody else will probably remember in 2020, we had the Mullen fire over in the huge fire. I wrote down like 107, almost 177,000 acres, huge fire. If you remember the day, I do, because I got lots of phone calls, high winds, and that thing moved fast and hot. Luckily for what the firefighters did, they worked with us a lot. They knew about our infrastructure. It came from the west towards Rob Roy. They were able to stop it so that it didn't really get close to our reservoir. We had some natural vegetation upstream of a lot of our inlets that actually protected a lot of the silt and sediment going into our reservoir. We had to shut one structure. But where we really saw the benefit was that fire ended up going south and went to the east towards Rob Roy. Well, Lake Owen, excuse me. Lake Owen, we had already treated 2 or 3 years previously. And we really noticed the difference there in what happened. That fire went through that area really quick. Because why? There was nothing there to really burn because we'd already treated it. So I just want to tell you the process works. It's valid. Another big thing that happens, and a lot of people here will understand that, but when you have fires go through that are really hot, they really scorch and burn the soil. And so it's almost like a moonscape sometimes when you go in there afterwards. And when you start having those problems years after, the amount of runoff sediment issues you have, for us as a water provider, they're big issues. Because they produce water quality, taste, and odor issues, not alone even the amount of sediment and ash that can get into our collection system. And then you have those plugged and we lose the ability to bring water to a community like Cheyenne. So as was mentioned earlier about, the cost benefit, Just think about the fact if we lose the ability to bring our water, we got reservoirs that are full, but they're full of, polluted water, and then our infrastructure, we can't get it there. There's huge implications. So these types of projects are valuable. The one last thing I'll add that I don't think's been mentioned this morning as well is what we also saw out of that initial project at Lake Owen is that project did sell timber. It was sellable. As Senator Hisk mentioned, it did go to some of the local mills, but also what came out of that, there was a benefit because there was some money made that was actually used to provide seed money for other projects that we've done over in the area. So there is other repercussions that are very positive out of these projects if you can sell the timber, where it provided seed money for other projects that we did around Rob Roy and are continuing to do. So I would just stress, this is super important for us as a municipality, and any municipality you talk around the state. Most of their collection facilities are a lot of times in mountainous areas. And when we have forest fires or are susceptible to that, it can really affect our ability to provide the drinking water that's needed for our communities. So don't know, Clint, if you wanted to add any additional.
Yes,
Thank
if I
you.
may, my name is Clint Bassett. I am, as Director Brooks indicated, I am the water treatment manager for the City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. My responsibilities don't just to cover water treatment, however, we maintain also all the structures west of Cheyenne, so my crews do that as well as the water quality. I did want to indicate and kind of build off of what Director Brooks was indicating on this as well, is that one of the last projects that we did, we were able to combine resources to address an area that had higher slopes. The silviculture in the area, the trees needed a particular kind of treatment in order to maintain. It was near a water source. We needed to reduce runoff, that type of thing. So as part of that, the cost for that treatment was more expensive than the value of the wood that came off of it. A lot of what we're seeing right now in the forests are those types of projects. The projects where the timber sales were available are pretty easy to sell, pretty easy to contract out. It's the projects that need the additional treatment that are in the harder to reach areas, the higher slopes that also have the most potential to damage water resources. Those are the projects that are not being adequately addressed. And because the costs are too high, this type of project will allow us to partner up with private industries, non-governmental, the state, federal, and get those projects taken care of. And those are the projects, unfortunately, that have the most opportunity to damage water resources, agricultural resources due to runoff, debris flows, that type of thing. This will help us address those projects. And I guess that's what I wanted to add today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett. Can we just keep going down the line unless anybody has any questions on the committee? All right. Who's next? Sir, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Eric South, Uena County Commissioner, also a family of timber operators, sawmill, logging, and I've been around it my whole life. This stuff is very well needed, that this money to go on. And with this good neighbor authority, I'll tell you, it's refreshing to be able to work with state foresters. And I'm going out on a limb to say this, rather than with the Forest Service, because I don't know how they did it, be able to have Kelly be able to manage a timber sale on National Forest. But it works a lot better, I'll tell you that much, just because the higher up you go, the harder it is to deal with government. That's what I've learned my whole life, and more so now that I've been a commissioner. And as Senator Hicks was saying, it's private industry that does a lot of this. That's the cost share. And sometimes some of these sales that you buy, it's not even worth it. Like somebody, I can't remember who said it, that there's no value in it, but you still have to get it out of there. And about all it's good for is firewood. And so then when you have a fire, it's there for it to, so I compliment Director Norris on trying to get this stuff through and appreciate you folks listening to us. And I think it'd be a very viable thing to do to pass this. And I appreciate your time. Oh,
Thank you,
do you
Mr.
have
Self.
any questions?
Yes, is there any questions for Mr. Self? Seeing none, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Mr. Cooper.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Shad Cooper, I represent the Wyoming Fire Advisory Board, but I'm really here speaking as a county fire warden from Sublette County. And I'd like to just give you a little perspective. In Sublette County, we've had many catastrophic fires, you know, the Fontanelle Fire, the Cliff Creek Fire, the Dollar Lake Fire last year, the Roosevelt Fire. It's really a significant amount of risk in our county. And I actually had some talking points here, but I'm gonna just kind of give you some anecdotes that I think are valuable for you. But I've seen how ineffective patchwork treatment can be. And I've experienced it in some of the large catastrophic fires we've had in Sublette County, where if all we're doing is treating every other property or land jurisdiction, or if there's a silo mentality where the forest treats their side of the fence, but then the other side of the fence isn't treated at all, the fire, it doesn't make any difference. The fire just moves through as though there was no treatment at all. And this bill is really near and dear to my heart. I remember I was really brokenhearted last year when we weren't able to get it to the finish line because it's so important. And the reason why is because this bill really fills the gap and makes sure that we have a tool to treat on a landscape level. The other thing I love about this bill is that it gives guidance from the state of Wyoming rather than from our federal partners. And why that's so important to understand is in the past, we've tried on many occasions to seek grant opportunities to do hazardous fuel reductions in Sublette County, and you know, frequently we're denied, and we're not able to provide assistance for our communities and our landowners. And one of the reasons why is because it's just not a priority area. It's not a priority landscape for you know, for the federal prioritization on how they allocate those grants. This grant is managed in Wyoming, and this will make a difference. And I'm just so excited to see this come back. And you know, please favorably consider this grant opportunity. It's just absolutely a game changer, and it's something that will make a difference in helping us to reduce the likelihood, the frequency, the severity, the intensity of wildland fire. And it just really gives us a tool that we can be proactive instead of reactive. And as a fire chief, that's really what I'm trying to do. And it just makes a huge difference to have access to resources like this. So thank you very much for your time and consideration, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Any questions? All right, go ahead. You're next. Introduce yourself, please.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ben Woodkey. I'm the Executive Director for Intermountain Forest Association, representing the timber industry here. We've heard a lot of very good reasons to support House Bill 78 this afternoon. I'm not sure I can say it much better than what you've heard today, but I'll highlight a couple pieces that we've heard in a couple other aspects. Drawing your attention in particular to not only the cost savings that the Speaker and State Forester Norris talked about, but also the savings to our natural resources, our forested resources. And it was touched on earlier, but I want to talk about a little bit more in depth about how some of the previous investments by the state of Wyoming quite literally saved forests in the Black Hills and elsewhere. And those forests are now being harvested. And that timber harvest is contributing to the sustaining of the timber industry and those communities that depend on the industry and those forests alike. You know, the House Bill 78 doesn't just provide a net savings in money. It really saves resources. It saves everybody else, the industries and communities that depend on those resources. Now, in my work, I've spent a lot of time driving through multiple states, one of those states being Colorado. There are many places in Colorado that you can drive for miles and miles and see almost nothing but dead forest, whether it's from fires or insects and disease. There's been significant losses there. And it's clear when you come into states like Wyoming, where the work has been done, the investments have been made, those forest resources have been saved. I've personally seen homes and communities that have been saved in the face of a fire from previous investments, previous work done on the ground, work just like that that's in this legislation. There are a lot of reasons. I'm going to stop that. We've heard a lot of very positive testimony today, and I'll stand by for questions and ask for your support for House Bill 78. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the committee? All right. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak on this bill? Mr. McGagna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim McGaggan with the Wyoming Stockbrokers Association. Certainly concur with what's been said, but just want to emphasize briefly the importance of this to our industry. As you know, we graze livestock in many of these forested areas, be they private, state, or federal lands. And two things happen. One that I know has been mentioned already is that resource management, timber management has tended to be done based on ownership boundaries. And I know several examples of private landowners who have forested lands that are adjacent to a national forest. They don't invest in the management even on their private lands necessarily to the extent they would like to, because it's of minimal value if the surrounding lands aren't also being appropriately managed. So it's helpful in that way. The other point I would make is that proper livestock grazing is an important tool in forest management and in preventing wildfires. And when fires start, they often progress rapidly, not through the tops of the trees, but through the under forage that is under those trees. Grazing that can be extremely helpful when there is a fire. And what we've seen numerous examples of with federal lands in Wyoming in particular is that some of these areas have become so overtaken by down timber as a result of various things that the livestock can't even get into the area anymore to do appropriate grazing. So the extent that we can be partners in this, both as private landowners and as providing a resource to help to manage the forested lands, we think that's terribly important. I've argued before at the federal level about getting more funding into forest management, fire prevention. And the number I've heard often, and I think it's probably even greater than this, but that $1 spent on forest management is worth $100 spent on fire suppression and recovery. And I think that's true in this case. So it's so pleasing to see that Wyoming's putting the focus on what we do before there's a fire, not how we respond. And with that, we just encourage your support for this. Be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Mr. McGagna? All right. Anybody else in the room? All right. Oh, thank you, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, there we go. My name's Wes Gardner. I'm a county commissioner from Teton County, Wyoming. And this is my first time giving testimony to Cheyenne. So first, I appreciate the opportunity. I really do. Thank you. I also hesitate. I really appreciate all the great momentum behind this bill. And as somebody with a stench of Teton County on me, I hesitate to support it. Don't want y'all to get the wrong idea. But I think for all the reasons that we've heard here today, this is a great bill. And I think an ounce of preventing a pound of intervention is really goes a long way. Folks, 97% of the land in our counties is public land, most of that forest. And that's why we moved there, most of us who live there. We see the forest as an asset. But what I've come to learn over the last few decades is the forest can also be a liability. And we are having folks in our county, and I would guess from around the state, if you sell your house, whoever's coming in buying the house can't get insurance. And those sales have gone backwards. That's a big deal. You're talking about multi-million-dollar homes now being uninsurable to a new owner. That's a really scary reality for folks in my neck of the woods. But you have the opportunity here today, and we have the opportunity across the state in managing our forests properly. They become an asset again. So really appreciate the thoughtfulness behind the bill, the thoughtfulness of this committee, and stand in support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. All right. Anybody else in the room? No. Do we have anybody online? Oh, sorry, I looked right through you. You got to speak up.
Not a worry. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. My name is Holly Kennedy. I'm here today representing Wyoming's 34 individual conservation districts through the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. And I will keep my sentiments very short. I think it's pretty easy to see the depth and breadth of support for this program in the room from multiple entities. And conservation districts are excited for the opportunity to have some funding to get some of these projects on the ground and work with some of those landowners on getting some of this important work done. As stated, this bill addressed so many risks to our state. It ultimately is going to result in some great outcomes for our state, including reducing catastrophic wildfire risk, emergency watershed response needs, potential damages to infrastructure, and potential degradation to water supplies. This really is a cost avoidance strategy, if you would, for our state. I think it saves the state money, it protects water resources, it protects natural resources, it protects the agricultural industry, it protects infrastructure, it protects communities. And it's a great way to leverage dollars by being able to pair monies like this with other sources such as grants. Again, just standing in support of the bill. And I would stand for any questions.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? All right. All right. Do we have anybody online? All right.
Madam Chairman.
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Before you close public comment, I was asked by the representative from the Farm Bureau to just inform the committee that they support this bill as well.
Thank you for that. All right, we're going to go ahead and close public comment. And I do want to remind the committee, this is a re-referral. We are not working the bill. We can increase, decrease, or delete the appropriation. So do I have what is the pleasure of the committee?
Move do pass.
All right, we have a motion by Representative Haroldson. We have a second by Representative Smith. And Ms. Childers, will you go ahead and any discussion, I guess, any discussion? None. Chairman Bear.
Just want to reiterate that, this committee's been very committed to forest health as well as firefighting this summer and through this session. So I think we'll carry that on and look forward to this bill moving forward.
Thank you, Chairman Bear. All right. Ms. Childers, will you take the roll?
Roll call vote, House Bill 78 do pass. Representative Allemand?
Aye.
Representative Angelos? Representative Haroldson?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
Aye.
Representative Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Bear?
Aye.
7 aye.
Thank you very much. All right. And with that, is there anything else, Chairman Bear?
We're good to adjourn, but I need the committee to stick around. We're going to have a little meeting here.
All right. We are adjourned.